Hello and welcome to the Connorcast. I am your host, Connor O.R.T. Linning. This is the first episode, and this podcast is basically me interviewing people who I really like in the music scene or the video game scene or anything I'm into, and I might have episodes where I talk with friends about various subjects. So for the first episode, I am super stoked to have Michael Garoad Kelly, who has done the soundtrack for Valhalla and is working on a couple other soundtracks. So here is the interview with him. Okay, I'm here joined with Mr. Michael Garoad Kelly. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. How about yourself?
Pretty good. Mike is the soundtrack composer and musician for Valhalla. You're also doing Dream Chaser and Corpses and Souls, and I think Corpses and Souls you just put out something like really recently.
Yeah, absolutely. The developer actually posted a video basically showcasing the engine that the game's going to be running on.
Do you have can I play a song? Do you want a song that I can insert right here so people know a bit about your work? Do you have a favorite song of yours?
Favorite song of mine? I don't know. What do you think? Do you have a particular favorite?
I remember I checked out Valhalla the first time and I was listening. The music's really good, and then Base of the Titans came on, and I was like, instant, like there's like a fanboy button. It went. So
Nice.
So that's the one I'll put right here. So this is Mike Kelly. This is Base of the Titans. Check it out. Okay, so first off, you have only one album on Bandcamp, and that is the first round Valhalla soundtrack, and it's awesome. Everybody should go buy it because it's totally rad. And my bone to pick with you is I literally want to throw my money at you, and there's only one album, so can you tell us if the second round or any other stuff you're doing will be on Bandcamp soon?
Yes, absolutely. So 2015, towards the latter part of the year, you're going to see and hear a lot of new music coming from me. Since Valhalla Prologue was released, I've actually been busy, incredibly busy, working on current projects and everything, and just multiple different projects. And, you know, that definitely takes time. So I haven't been able to, I guess, release albums or release music in a consistent fashion or whatnot. But towards the latter part of 2015, again, you're going to hear a lot more music that I'm extremely excited to showcase to you guys. You know, as far as Valhalla Prologue goes, it's really interesting. Like I'm actually very surprised at the feedback that album got. Personally, I kind of felt it was I guess maybe a starter track for myself. It's the first thing I ever really put out there.
So prologue is the same as first round, just to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So just kind of breaking it short that, towards as we kind of go further into 2015, there will be a lot of, newer stuff that you'll hear and releases coming up.
Why did you pick the name Garoad, if I'm pronouncing that right?
It's kind of funny, actually. Yeah, and you did pronounce it right. Yeah. So way back in the day, I don't remember, I'm not sure if you ever heard of this. I mean, you may have. But way back in the day when I was like a teenager, I used to visit MIRC a lot, the chat client. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And at the time I started using it, I was actually a pretty big fan of the series Gundam X at the time. So my user handle was Garoad, after the main character, which incidentally, I came to find out later that the particular sub I watched had misspelled the name. But anyway, I actually just kind of went by that handle, and I opened up a YouTube account under that handle. And when I first started getting into music production and actually putting things out there, I just kind of put it out under that handle, and people started I started gathering a following, and it just kind of stuck. Just one of those things, I guess.
It's kind of old because I really like bands that have one-word names or people that have one-word names. Cher.
Right. Yeah.
I think that works really well. So just to go along with that, when you started, what's your earliest memory of music, and then what's your earliest memory of wanting to be a musician, taking the extra step above music?
Right. Yeah. So earliest memory of music, is that referring to more along the lines of my approach to music, or just me listening or consumption of music?
Well, it could be both, but my original intent was the first time everybody hears music all the time, but the first time you heard music and you're like, this is more to me than painting would be, kind of, it was your medium that you really liked.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, I think I was around, I was probably 12 or 11, and I remember I was a very big fan of old school Toonami that used to play. And one of the shows I watched all the time was Gundam Wing. And I just remember being something about the music, at that time, Kao Otani's mixture of synthetic elements with orchestral elements was just amazing to me. So
what's your age? I'm 23. Are you around the same age?
I'm 28. I'm an old guy.
Oh, yeah. Geez, that's old.
Yeah.
I think we probably watched some of the same cartoons, so I know that that kind of 90s, 80s synth stuff, that's the
shit. Yeah. So that was actually the first album I got for Christmas. As a Christmas present, I got the first soundtrack, Operation 1 for Gundam Wing.
That is a sick first album.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. I feel very fortunate, and I remember just playing the music, and a lot of the softer, more sensual tracks that again combine that kind of orchestral element with the synthetic elements, and the sound design and textures of everything was just really magical to me at the time. And I think that really kind of spurred my interest and pursuit of listening to more, consuming more music that had that kind of Japanese style and mixture of those synthetic and orchestral elements to it.
And is that when you wanted to be a musician, when you heard that specifically? Or
not really.
Later?
That came a lot later, actually. So it's kind of a funny story. I actually don't think I really started getting into producing music or pursuing music myself until I was probably around the age of 22 or 23, I want to say. And I guess the result of that was, anime, video games, and music have just always been three of my biggest passions, but I never really kind of pieced putting them together and pursuing that. And I was actually living in this apartment at the time, and there was this producer who lived upstairs from me, who would do he would produce hip hop songs or R&B songs for local artists and everything. And I was just curious to know how he did this. And one day he took me upstairs and he kind of showed me, I guess his layout, with the keyboard, and he used Reason at the time. And he was just letting me know, he kind of showed me a little bit of things here and there on how it all works. And, I was curious. I said, are you musically trained at all? And he said, no, I'm not. And from there, I was curious. So I started kind of dabbling into that stuff myself. And it was probably around, probably about a year later when, I don't know, I was actually, I I was browsing YouTube and I came across a piano collection. It was a fan-made piano song for Final Fantasy 13. This is before the game had been released, and I thought it was beautiful, and I was like, wow, someone just did this, and that really started to kind of motivate me and drive me to learn as much as I could about music and kind of pursue, I guess, writing music for video games. I think it's the first time I ever kind of thought, maybe I could actually do this. Maybe I could, learn to write music and, put it into video games and combine the two.
Well, the thing about that is, like, if that was a fan-made thing, they probably just used, like, a VST piano and typed in the notes, like, didn't actually play it. So, like, literally you could do that. There's no, like, barrier to entry besides basic music theory, right?
Right, exactly. And I would even, I don't know, like, personally myself, I've come across a lot of people who say, well, I don't have any music training and I don't know where to begin. Honestly, I had no formal, I didn't know anything about basic music theory. I knew nothing when I first started getting into it. Of course, I did do research on, like scales, and I didn't even know, I wasn't even familiar with the notes on a piano, right?
Okay, if you're making the shit you're making now and it's been 5 years and I've been making music for 10 years, I am mad jelly.
It's just I can just definitely say that. Well, your music sounds great too, by the way, man. Like, I haven't told you that.
You know how it is when you listen to your own stuff and it never compares to listening to stuff you really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that comes from too, like, you just listen to it over and over over again. Jesus. So yeah, and but yeah, the way I see it is that I've talked to some people who say that, like, I have no music experience, I don't think I could ever get into it. I tell them that you absolutely can. I'm not trying to knock, like, music education or anything like that, but if you're dedicated enough and you put in enough hours, because, when I say enough hours, I mean an infinite amount of hours, because I could not even tell you the amount of time and hours and dedication that I put into it. But no, I'm a firm believer that, at any point, if you're ready to jump in and, make that a reality or pursue that, you can absolutely do so.
Well, and it's like with the internet now, there's like no barrier to entry for almost anything. Like, you want to learn to program, you have the internet, there's free, not necessarily like free software, like Stallman software, but like free as in money software. You can just learn to program. You can get like that Linux multimedia station if you can't afford FL Studio or whatever, and you can just start doing it. Like, there is no barrier to entry anymore, which is really sweet.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is an amazing time when you think about it. It's the amount of information we have readily available at our fingertips is fantastic. It's amazing.
Yeah, and well, it kind of sucks for me, at least, because, like, making horror music, there's no, if you type in, like, how to make horror music on YouTube, there's no, like, tutorials.
Right.
It's like a niche thing, and, like, nobody. Like, I learned to do it through doing hip-hop sampling, and then I was like, well, if I take the technique and then I apply it to, like, sampling from, like, Silent Hill and Resident Evil and stuff, you could start doing horror. And so I'm hoping, I'm going to start live streaming with a friend, and he wants me to teach him how to do music, and he doesn't have any previous experience, and I'm going to show him that, and maybe I can be, like, the first guy who's like, you want to make Silent Hill music? This is what you watch. This is how you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. You should, start your own tutorial series. I'm sure that will blow up, man, because, as popular, it is kind of niche, and I don't see that many tutorials on there for it. The tutorials I have seen for, like, horror music are, I don't know, kind of like your standard, run-of-the-mill horror, haunted house kind of music.
Usually they're very, like, orchestral.
Right.
The re kind of stuff.
Yeah, man. So I'd say go for it. I would definitely watch that. That would be great.
Well, you actually live stream a little bit. I've come into some of your streams, and I was watching you make beats and, like, kind of comparing it to how I make beats. And you use I know what you use. Cubase, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah. Have you used other workstations or anything like FL, Sonar, Pro Tools?
Yeah, I've actually used, before I started utilizing Cubase, I think I used Reason for about 2 years before I started hopping into Cubase. And that's
that guy showed you how to do it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of interesting now that I think about it, because a lot of people say that Reason is probably one of the more complicated DAWs to use. And I think that primarily stems from like the different synths and and one thing I still love about Reason is the amount of customization
all you can have wiring that you can do and stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The wiring and the customization you can do to the samples and the synthesizers. It's an amazing digital audio workstation. I know it gets some flack sometimes, but personally, I think it's still amazing piece of hardware.
Yeah, I've never used it, but like I look at it and it's like if I wanted to make, like, you know, people kind of knock on like, oh, he only uses presets and it's not an original sound, blah, blah, blah. But it's like if you wanted to really go full on and get your own original sound going, like the Reason would be the thing to use because it's like all those wires and all the crazy stuff you can do.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of leads into a question I already had, which is about your equipment and gear. So we talked about workstations. What are some of your favorite VSTs? And I believe I hear guitar on your songs. Do you play guitar or is that like a VST?
No, that's actually I do play that live. So all the guitar recordings I do are live. Few of my favorite VSTs. Definitely have
if your guitar was a VST, that is an amazing VST.
Yeah, right. Yeah, as far as VSTs goes, what I use for my guitar is I actually use I sometimes switch it up between Amplitude 3 and Guitar Rig 5. A few other VST.
You direct input clean and then you use effects over top of it.
Right.
Do you use like an amp head or anything, or just straight in?
Just straight in.
Okay.
And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll add like Cubase has some distortion effects and things of that nature. So a lot of stuff you hear on my guitar are pretty much like generic, Cubase plugins for distortion and whatnot. For like the rhythm guitars that kind of crunch, I'll just use like a generic Cubase distortion patch on that. And then for lead guitar, I like to put a little bit of chorus on my lead guitar too, and that's just a Cubase, plugin as well.
Like the default chorus effects plugin?
Right.
I have a random questions and none of them lead into each other because this is my first time ever interviewing somebody. So I'm going to jump straight into something you mentioned before, which is you really liked Japanese music, and that's what you, like your first album, that's what you're really into. You are from Alabama, if I'm correct?
Yes.
And do you think, because there's people who say, culture doesn't influence anything and then culture is everything, back and forth, there's that kind of thing. Do you think that your upbringing or your, I guess, like American culture in your area or anything, does that influence your music, or do you think...
Honestly, to be completely honest with you, that's a great question. I don't think I've ever thought of it like that. Let me think about this.
Well, because I try and think of it like, because I'm from Canada, and it's like, what culture would be put into this? There is no like straight up, the Vikings have thousands of years of history or whatever, and if you're from Norway and you want to play black metal, that's what you get, There's no Canada history for me,
Yeah. That's a great question. I would definitely say my particular style, I would absolutely say is mostly comprised of Japanese influences. But I don't deny that there are probably some subconscious, influences from American music, like pop music and things of that nature that are in there as well. I'll say a big one too is probably Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails.
Yes.
He's a huge influence, and I feel like when I listen to my music, a lot of the textures I use are definitely inspired and influenced by Japanese music. However, I feel like a lot of the way the songs I structure them when I go back and listen to them, I feel like a lot of the way that the arrangements are laid out and structured, I feel like there's a lot of influences from the way Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails kind of arranges and lays the songs out. For instance, if you listen to a lot of Nine Inch Nails songs, there's generally a kind of a repeating line, like whether it be like a pad progression or even just a bass line. And what he does a lot is he builds on top of that. Like he'll add layer after layer after layer after layer in the arrangement to keep things fresh and interesting. And I think that's something I kind of do subconsciously without really even think about it. Like I'll find a particular sound I like, whether it be a bass line or even just a simple synth sound, and I'll just go about layering on top of that as much as I can to drive the track forward.
Well, have you ever heard The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the American version Trent Reznor
Yes.
and Atticus Ross, because that is like
Yes.
one of my favorite all-time soundtracks.
Yeah, absolutely. I could literally sit here and I could talk about Trent Reznor's work for his time at Nine Inch Nails, up to his more recent work in movie compositions. I could literally sit here and talk all day about it. I mean, I'm just
The 10-hour podcast.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Social Network.
Yeah.
I really like his work on Gone Girl as well.
So do you have like favorite scales, time signatures, any kind of like musical? Everybody has like their bag of tricks that they always like
Right.
to build off of or pull out. You know, do you have anything like that?
I don't. At least, nothing that I'm aware of. You know, to be honest, it's kind of embarrassing to say, but you know, I'm not very familiar. I mean, of course, I'm familiar with like basic time signatures and scales and things of that nature. There's nothing in particular that I know by name. Like, I'm not very well versed in, you know, music terminology or specific, you know, what the specific scale is or whatnot. Now, I do know that there are chord progressions and particular scales that, you know, I kind of go to or that I prefer, you know, the sound to. But
Yeah,
you know,
'cause when I
unfortunately,
listen to your music and hear little things that, you know, you got your style going on.
right.
If that was like conscious or not.
Well, I think part of it is, and I think part of it isn't as well. You know, obviously, like I guess I want to say like the voicings and a lot of chords I use. I think that's kind of subconscious. But for things you might hear for like Dream Chaser or Valhalla, you'll probably hear me do subtle things like maybe a similar chord progression or similar kind of melody, because one thing I like to do with soundtracks is kind of carry a particular motive and kind of, you know, piece that in this song, and then you might hear a bit of this song in a different song. I think it kind of helps bring in a soundtrack or album together. You know, it kind of brings it around full circle. So I like doing little things like that.
I remember you put out a new song, and it's Calmotrine Dream. I don't know if Calmotrine Dream. And then you put on a new one for the second round, and there was the same. It was slightly slower, but it had the same melody. And I remember sending you a tweet like, dude, that's sick.
Yeah. I love doing things like that. Again, and you know, I need to quit like fanboying over Trent, but that's one thing I really thought was really cool when listening to a lot of old Nine Inch Nails albums. Like if you listen to The Fragile or The Downward Spiral, you'll hear a lot of that as well. Like The Downward Spiral, there's a particular melody that you'll hear a few times in the album. And, you know, the first time I heard that, you know, and recognized that, I thought that was just, you know, very cool. And the same thing with The Fragile. There's a couple bass lines and a couple different melodies that kind of carry itself through there as well. So I like doing that with albums. And for second round, you'll hear a lot more of that as well.
That kind of makes me think of, when I think of like bands reusing melodies and kind of being like conceptual, I think of Dream Theater, because I listened to them a ton when I was a teenager. Did you listen to them at all?
I've listened to a couple of their songs. I haven't really dived into them or listened to a lot of their discography. I know that they had like a side project going on, and one of my favorite rock songs ever is what is it? Acid Rain by Liquid Tension Experiment. Yeah, that song is amazing. Holy shit.
Well, I remember there's a Dream Theater DVD. I think it was live at Budokan, and you know they're playing Dream Theater songs. And I think at some point in that DVD, there's like a melody, and they just started playing the Acid Rain thing, and I was like, dude,
right?
So sick. That is a sick song. Yeah,
something about that. I can't pinpoint what it is, but you hear this familiar melody, and you hear it in an unexpected place, and it's just I tend to mark out when I hear stuff like that.
So are we gonna have like a new Valhalla song that has the stuff?
Yeah. Probably. Well, I take that back. You may. There's one track in particular you may hear something like that, but the guitar is gonna be a lot more complimentary. And Valhalla second round, you're not gonna hear any like super rock anthems or too much shredding in Valhalla or too many guitar focused tracks. I wanted to really keep the soundtrack focused on the synthetic elements and the electronic elements for the cyberpunk world, and have the guitars kind of complement that rather than kind of take over.
Because as on the subject of like adding new things, as I listened to, I think it's the latest Valhalla song, it's March of the White Knights on your SoundCloud page, and at the end of it you have these choirs that are kind of like spooky sounding. You almost going into like a bit of like horror territory. I thought like it got a little creepy. I was super stoked when I heard that because I love horror stuff, right?
Yeah,
but
thanks, man.
I mean, yeah, it's sweet like hearing I was listening to it and I was like, this is good. It kind of reminds me of some other stuff, and then that comes in. It's something new that you hadn't done yet.
Right. I'm actually, I'm very excited. I can't really talk too much about it right now, but there's actually a project.
No,
where
share every detail for this podcast.
I can't, unfortunately, but yeah, there is actually going to be a project I'm going to be working on a little bit later. It's going to be very, very different from Valhalla, but it's going to have some horror elements to it as well that I'm really excited about.
So speaking of different stuff than Valhalla, you're doing the soundtrack for Dream Chaser and Corpses and Souls. And
yes.
You also have a SoundCloud playlist called Fairway, a collection for daydreamers. Is that like a solo album, or is that a soundtrack you're doing?
That's a solo album. It's one of those. Yeah, and interestingly enough, I was
it's a very anime sounding solo.
Yeah. I wanted to. It's actually pretty interesting. Like, I remember there was, everybody has those days where everything is just a rough day, right? Just a bad fucking day. And I remember I got home and I was just stressed out and I wasn't feeling great. And I thought, let me just write some music to see if I can relieve some of this. And it was surprising how I think every single track that I have posted on SoundCloud right now, most of them are work in progress. I think all but 2 of them were songs or ideas that I kind of came up with on that night. And it was just one of those things where it felt very personal, it felt very pure, and I want to explore that more when I have the time. Unfortunately, I have not been able to work on it lately due to other projects I'm on, but that's absolutely going to be a project that I'll be focusing a lot of time on in the future.
So Dream Chaser and Corpses and Souls are not finished, as far as I can tell.
Right.
I was wondering if you wanted to fill in the blanks on those 2 so people know a little bit more about, because everybody who knows you knows Valhalla because that is out and people are playing it, and that's probably how they heard you. But who are you working with on those games, and like what kind of games are they, and what are you trying to do with the soundtrack?
So Dream Chaser, we'll start with that one. Dream Chaser is by Creator Studios. They're actually on Twitter. You can just follow them at Creator Studios. And it's going to be a very retro styled beat 'em up. Kind of a 8-bit, 16-bit style of art going. And what I wanted to do with that particular soundtrack is kind of give it that retro feel as well. I wanted to just think about how to put it. I guess I wanted to give it kind of an old school beat 'em up kind of feel, like, sounds that you might hear on like a PlayStation 1 fighting game, maybe a little bit of Tekken 3 influences in there, Rival Schools, just particular games like that, so I want to kind of give it an old school PlayStation 1, just kind of straightforward kind of beat 'em up kind of feel to the music. Corpses and Souls is done by Side Scroll Studios, and the approach I wanted to take for that game there's a lot of Metroidvania, Castlevania influences with it. The game is also going to have a lot of sci-fi elements to it as well. So my approach to that particular game was kind of writing something in that kind of that gothic Castlevania-esque kind of style, but also add a little bit more synthetic elements to it as well, give it a little bit more of a sci-fi feel. So it's almost like, if I guess I want to say Castlevania and sci-fi anime were to combine, basically. There's not really not going to be any guitars in the Corpses and Soul soundtrack. It's going to be really just synthetic elements and more traditional gothic elements to it.
Do you play any other instruments besides guitar?
A little bit of piano. I would not call myself a pianist though, but that's really it. Just guitar and piano.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a pianist either. Like, sometimes I'll have piano solos, but they're all programmed in. I could not even attempt to play that stuff.
Yeah, I'm actually very impressed. Just kind of speaking on that. Like, I know there's a lot of people who approach composing, they'll open up a screen and they'll kind of program everything in and they can hear what they program in. And I have never been able to do that. I've tried that approach. And so I just found that really fascinating, how people can compose and program everything in that method. I think that's amazing.
Well, like I asked you about like if you have a bag of tricks, and like the thing for me is like I love C minor. I don't know why. Everything, right. Like 90% of what I do is in C minor all the time. Yeah. And the thing is like I've played that scale or written in that scale for like 10 years, and so when I want to make a riff, I can hear it in my head and I know how it sounds in C minor because I've heard it so many freaking times. Yeah. So I think it's probably like the people who do that like they have their bag of tricks and they know what they're doing. And the thing is, like, I have a song called what song is it on Sub-Zero album called Backup, and there's a piano solo in it. And that piano solo, like when I programmed in, it was like the song's in F sharp minor, I think, and I just plugged in random F sharp notes.
Right,
totally random, and it like actually sounded good, and I kept it.
Nice. It's amazing. Yeah, right. It's amazing how that happens sometimes. Like, you can be programming something or playing something, and then you just, I don't know, maybe out of frustration, or you don't really think about it, and you just start playing random notes, and you're like, holy shit, that sounded good. And it actually leads to something. Well,
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if I write a song in C minor, like most of the songs that are really cool break the rules of like what scale. Like C minor has open second, third if your guitar is in drop C, but the first fret you would never use. But sometimes adding that in makes it sound really awesome. So it's like sometimes just doing random notes is really sick. We should build like a random number generator, and that's what fret you play. When you work with, is it Sukeban?
Yes.
Okay, because it's like a Japanese word, and I'm trying to pronounce it right.
Right.
Sukeban. Okay. When you work with them, do you do any of the game development? And I think that some of the team members are from Latin America, South America.
So
how do you work together? And is there like language barriers? Like, what's the team environment kind of like?
It's fantastic, to be honest with you. Kind of leading up before I answer the question fully, you have to forgive me. But when I started to approach like the indie game scene, like trying to write music for different projects and whatnot, I didn't have the best experiences, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was yeah, right. Yeah. You know, I was pumped up. I felt ready, and I was going to hit the scene hard, and I was just incredibly excited. And it was some of the things that you run across are kind of an eye opener, and a little. It can be a little disheartening. But thankfully, I started working with these guys. It's just been fantastic. There's really no language barrier at all. Chris and Fernando are based in Venezuela, and while I don't really necessarily help out necessarily with the programming or writing or the art, we all work together to listen to each other's ideas. So it's very collaborative. We all take part, like Fernando does the programming and the writing, Chris does all the art, I do all the music, and we all work with each other to give our input and thoughts and what we think would work, and we all kind of take that back and do our thing and bring it together as a whole. So it's very communication is very open, it's very collaborative. We all trust each other on what we can do, so there's a lot of creative freedom that each of us have, and it's just an amazing environment to work in, and I'm very thankful for it.
Because the thing with, like, when I played Valhalla and then I heard that you probably haven't met each other because you're on different parts of the planet,
right?
Like, the game feels like it was made by people in the same room that all grew up with the same influence. Like, it feels like a very solid game. It doesn't feel like for a couple of different people that are totally different, kind of like mix matching things together. It feels really solid.
Yeah, thank you. We haven't met, and it's actually kind of funny. Back a couple years ago, I want to say, I had been writing music, and I thought to myself, I was like, let me find some kind of project to actually focus on a particular style to change things up. And I ran across the project they were working on at the time, and we kind of started talking. And interestingly enough, it was kind of funny that Chris was actually a YouTube subscriber of mine and enjoyed my music. So that was pretty funny. And we started working together there. And it's just, some people say the universe or God or, whatever you want to call it, kind of draws people together at times. I felt like that's kind of what happened with our team. Just the influences we have, our aesthetic preference, kind of our thought process in making games and the visuals and the writing, it all just kind of meshes well with each other. So it feels effortless, when we work on different projects together and, think about what we need to do going forward.
And so what are you guys doing with Valhalla right now? Like, if there's like a next big, because like a big thing would be like we made a demo and then we released it and then we did this and that. Like, what's the next big thing you guys want to do with Valhalla, or what's the next big thing that Sukeban Games wants to do?
Well, I can't speak too much on Valhalla right now. All I can say is that there's a lot of new stuff that's going to be coming out very, very, very shortly, possibly within the next week. So I don't want to ruin any surprises there, but it's going to be a lot of, a lot of terrific stuff to look forward to. After Valhalla, what we're actually looking to do, again, I can't without disclosing too much. There was an original project we were working on that we were very excited about before we even started Valhalla. And interestingly enough,
How old is Valhalla?
probably it came into creation, I want to say last March. Like the idea came into creation, I want to say last March
You
or
guys
towards
made all of that in like a year?
Yeah,
Holy crap.
we're working ourselves incredibly hard, but yeah. So Valhalla was actually a kind of a break from an original project we were working on to just kind of recharge our batteries for the Cyberpunk gem they had last year. So once we finished Valhalla, we're looking to kind of take up the reins on that project and implementing everything we've learned through the development process of Valhalla and implementing that into the original project and going from there.
Yeah, see, I had that when I made my first game, and like you look back at it and you're like, holy crap, there's all kinds of stuff I'd change or do differently because I know better now. Is there anything when you listen to the first round Valhalla tracks that you listen to and you're like, I would do something different? Is there anything like that?
A little bit. If I go back and listen to the Valhalla soundtrack, I think for the prologue, I'm satisfied for what it was. I think when I listened back to a few tracks, I said, oh man, I could have maybe added a little bit more decoration here, or added some more to the melody here. But I try not to focus too much on that, right? I don't want to get hung up on that. But overall, for what it is, just kind of a collection of jukebox jams to set the tone for the prologue. I'm pretty satisfied with it. So there's not way too much of that.
One of the things I really like about the album is like, this is more of like a musician producer kind of thing. But when people, like when somebody makes a song in FL Studio, as soon as you open a new project, there's an FL limiter on the master track. And if you don't turn that off or you don't change it, every single song anybody ever makes, it sounds like it came out of FL Studio. Yeah. And when I heard your stuff, I couldn't tell because it sounds really clean, really crisp, and I couldn't tell there was no I couldn't even tell what VSTs or drum packages you might use because it sounded unique and original. It sounded really good.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So when you're like as a musician so far, what would be like your proudest or best moment, and then what would be your worst moment, or like what did you struggle with the most in the last 5 years, I guess?
I guess I would say, without a doubt, I would say probably my proudest moment was just, the release of Valhalla Prologue. That was my first actual release, and the particular approach and style I took with that soundtrack, isn't too common. So I was not sure at all what the response to it would have been. So just seeing everybody kind of get it and understand what I was trying to accomplish with that and enjoy that was definitely a incredible boost to my motivation and confidence behind everything, and I'm very thankful for that. I would say probably the worst period I guess I went through was probably sometime last year. Again, what we were talking about earlier is my first time trying to kind of break into the indie game scene and working with various developers, and I'm obviously I'm not going to name any names or go too far into detail, but there's a certain, and again, I'm not trying to lump indie games into one particular category because there are some fantastic developers, some amazing, publishers, amazing developers out there who do a fantastic job. But from my personal experiences, I came across just so many developers and got an overall sense of, lack of communication, lack of professionalism.
That's also very prevalent in bands, like the band scene. That's brutal. It's actually worse, if you ask me. So. It was just again, it was very frustrating, and it I guess I want to say it kind of caused my motivation to kind of take a nosedive for a little while. One thing too is that part of that was I would have a lot of I would sometimes have indie developers contact me who say, hey, I really enjoy your style. Can you write this or that? And I'm like, sure. And, I don't want to sound pretentious or selfish when I say this, but, when it comes to revisions, I have kind of a interesting, I guess, thought process as far as revisions go.
I know that revisions sometimes can be very good for a project, and I'm completely fine with them as long as I don't feel like I'm being pushed out of my style or how I'd approach music, right?
Then it just becomes a day job. It's like
right.
Yeah, you don't want to make music and it's like a 9 to 5 job, and you're supposed to make a 4/4 A flat minor track and it's supposed to sound like this, and it's like, well, I don't know, that's not what I want to make.
Yeah, absolutely, and it all kind of comes back to, I guess, the developer or the director of the project. Obviously they have the final say so, and what I'm doing is supposed to basically expand on their vision or fit their vision. But at the same time, part of me feels like, if I'm going to take on the role of, producing the music, I want to do it in a way that it feels pure for me. Right. Yeah. If I ever feel like I'm doing revisions or I'm being steered away from something that I would not usually write or doesn't feel honest or pure from my own influences, I lose a lot of motivation, and I feel like the soul of the soundtrack loses a lot of motivation. And, of course, there's obviously times where a developer will kind of try and push you to almost emulate like a song. They're like, hey, listen to this. I want it to sound like this. And, you send them something that has, I guess, the same kind of, not necessarily style, but the same kind of vibe, just in your own expression of it, and they're like, well, it doesn't sound close enough. And that actually, I don't know, trying to think about how to put this, it's very frustrating. Anytime I feel like I'm being forced to emulate a track or not compose something that feels pure to how I compose it, then it gets very frustrating, and I begin to lose interest and motivation extremely quickly.
The way I kind of look at it is like, if you want the music to sound different, there's going to be somebody else who's a lot better than, you. I'm not saying you, I mean the proverbial you. But,
right.
There's going to be somebody that's a lot better at that style that they want. And if you get somebody who's 100% into it, which would be that other person, they benefit from that. And then you can go and do whatever it is you want to work on. So it's one of those things you want to, like, if you want to bend somebody to do a certain style or something, like, everybody loses. And it's not going to sound as good as, like I can tell when I listen to the Valhalla soundtrack, like, you're digging it. I could tell.
Yeah.
Like, and it would, if it sounded like you're having your arm twisted or something, like, you could hear it, and it's like, why would I want to listen to it?
Right. And I remember last year, kind of going, I guess, back to the original question of, I guess, maybe a low point or whatever. I remember I composed a song for a trailer for a particular game that was launching their Kickstarter, and my arm was kind of like, I had so many wonderful ideas for this game. Just the aesthetics alone and the type of game it was, I was ecstatic about it. But as we went further in the process of composing, my arm was kind of twisted to make it sound, I guess, more cinematic with, elements of electro and dubstep, and I'm not going to like hate on any of that at all, but it's just not me, right? There are people out there who can do it a million times better than me. So my arm got kind of twisted into doing that. So, I ended up kind of giving in and giving the developer what he wanted. And he's like, oh, this is great. I love it, yada, yada. Well, the trailer gets released, and I'm kind of reading the comments on the trailer and everything. And I can't tell you how many times that I saw someone say, oh, this music, what's dubstep doing in a game like this? Or this sounds absolutely horrible. And right. So ever since that day where I saw that, I've made it a point to never write anything that doesn't feel like it's genuinely for me.
That'd be pretty, like, I mean, you want to see it succeed because you're working on it and stuff, but like to have somebody twist your arm and then see that kind of fail, there must have been like a little bit of like, yep.
Yeah.
I knew this
there was. Yeah, there was. There was, So
I actually learned a ton about you asking you these questions. I didn't even know that we had been through the same thing with getting into the indie scene. And like recently I've been working with a team making a Dreamcast game called Hypertension, and I've been working with a developer named Jesper Tingvall, who is like the world's biggest badass. And I've been having like the time of my life. Like, I've been having so much fun, and I've been working on my own game. If you had a tip to give somebody who's trying to get into it or is in it and is having really frustrating experiences, like, what would you try and get them to find somebody that's really good to work with?
I would, that's a great question. I actually had someone ask me that a few days ago, and going on that, I would definitely say keep at it and just understand that the frustration and the discouragement is all part of the process anyway. You know, whether it be music or something anybody wants to do as far as reaching a goal, that's part of the game, and it's necessary for growth and continuing forward. So keep at it and never allow yourself to settle for a project or settle for doing something that doesn't feel like it's genuinely you. Again, I'm kind of going back to that, but if you're not writing the music that you want to write or the music that you enjoy and love, then your heart's not going to be into it and you're not going to do your best work. So the best piece of advice I can say is just to keep grinding, and I promise you, you're going to find that project or that group of people to work with where your ideas and your influences and everything just kind of coincide with each other and they mash together. They melt together very well, and you're going to write music that you love. You're going to write music that you care about on a project that you care about, and you're going to do, you know, your best work, and it's all going to come together at that point.
And I don't know if it's like this for you, but like, you know, making music is fun, working on a good project is fun, but there's also tons of hours of just like when you're mixing and mastering and it's just like listening to it over and over and over, you never want to hear it again. Oh my God, this is painful, lonely late nights, you know, like there's a lot of that. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that can be a little intimidating for people who want to even start something, you know, as far as like writing music. You know, they hear other artists just churn out album after album, or, you know, they release song day after day that's just fantastic. And I don't think people understand that, you know, it's not like I sit down at my computer and within 2 hours I've written this song. You know, I just sit down and like, oh, here's chord progression, here's the drums. It doesn't work like that at all. It takes hours and hours of trial and error and listening to the same song again and again. And there have been times, I can't tell you how many times, you know, I've just kind of sat, you know, in front of a blank screen with, you know, no creativity that's been able to spark. And that's the worst.
yeah, that's what goes on behind the scenes. It's not like we sit down and all of a sudden write like a hit song or, you know, a great soundtrack or anything like that. It takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication. You know, I mean, there have been multiple times too when I was working on Valhalla Prologue and even Second Round, where sometimes I'm sure this has happened to you before, you'll kind of go back and listen to the album to see how it's all piecing together. And there may be times where you're like, wow, this is really good. This is something really special. I feel really good about this. And then maybe the next day or the second day you're listening to it and you're like, oh God, this sucks.
Every single thing I do has that.
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh man, I should just quit music. This is terrible. Oh, this sounds kind of interesting.
Yeah. Oh, this sounds great. Next day you're like, oh shit, man, I can't release this. you know. But it's just part of it, you know.
And I think like you have the self-awareness to be really down on your music. That means that it's not good enough and you want to do a better job. So actually all the negative kind of stuff that goes into making music is actually a good thing. If you didn't have that, you would just release stuff as you make it and you wouldn't fine tune it and you wouldn't labor over it, you know?
Yeah, I can agree 200% on that. You know, what is that quote? What is it? Something like discouragement is the coal that fuels the fire, as they say.
Yeah.
You know, anytime you feel discouraged or you feel a little hard on yourself, you know, that just motivates you or, you know, makes you want to push yourself to become even better. You know, there's also been a lot of very talented people I've come across who are really good, but they haven't necessarily made improvements because I don't think I think they're satisfied with where they're at, but I don't think they're really opening their minds or to the possibility of, you know, let me try this or experiment this to get better. So I think as far as musicians go, like you and myself and others, you know, it's very important to have that mindset of, you know, when I go into making a song, I want every song. I know it's not going to happen like that. I know not every song I'm going to write is going to be the best song ever, but I try to make it the best it can be every time I write something. Like I try to incorporate maybe something new, or well, I'm kind of going on I guess rambling on right here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is
that I have you on here, man. I want to hear it.
yeah. I guess you know, every time I open up a new template, you know, I just go into it thinking to myself, okay, let's make this the best we can possibly make it, right? I never want to fall into the habit of just doing copy and paste. Like I go in and just write a generic chord progression that I'm used to and just throw something in there. I always try and push the envelope just a little bit further with each song.
Yeah, see, because I just mentioned that I always use C minor like 90% of the time. So you just said you don't want to reuse tricks, which is a lot of what I do. But like the thing is like I always do that, but then I try to make the sound different, because I think that the sound of what you're doing is, I think it's more important than the notes you choose. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and when I was saying that, I wasn't necessarily regarding, because that's more of like that's your style, right? That's your approach.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying it like that. I was just saying that, like, wow, that's interesting, because we have different, like, you want to choose different chord progressions, and I like using the same ones, but then working on how it sounds, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So 2 last questions for you. Do you have any guilty pleasures for listening, for soundtracks, or for video games?
Guilty pleasures.
You secretly play Daikatana like 24 hours a day or something.
As far as...
He's awesome. I'm not making fun of him. He's awesome.
Yeah, right. As far as guilty pleasures in music, not necessarily soundtracks, but I will say that, quite often, there may be tracks I'll play like in my car, like Taylor Swift, believe it or not. Granted, I'm no Taylor Swift like hardcore fan or anything, but her song Drive, or not Drive, is that it? No, what is that song?
I haven't listened to anything that's been on the radio in the last 10 years, so I have no idea.
Right. So I guess that would be my guilty pleasure, is that every now and then I'll, blast, some top, hits from the radio or whatever. Like, I'm all about that bass, no treble. Like, I love that song, man. That is a huge guilty pleasure of mine. Taylor Swift's, what's that song? Crap, it's that really catchy one where Shake, I think it's the name of it, or whatever. But yeah, that's definitely a guilty pleasure. As far as soundtracks, I can't really think of any guilty pleasures as far as soundtracks, other than sometimes you may hear me listening to like I don't know if you ever listen to much of the opening songs to like really old 70s or 80s like Super Robo shows. It's got like the masculine men singing over like these jazzy horns and guitars and everything.
I remember like somebody asked me that once, and when people were really rickrolling each other all the time, like I remember the first time I got rickrolled and I didn't get the joke because I was listening to it and I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on the same page as you. Like, I love that song. Anytime someone would rickroll me, I'd be like, "Oh no, you got me!" But secretly, I would, just be kind of moving along to the music.
But I took it to like a whole nother level. Like, I went to the record store the next day and started buying his albums. I was like, "This is
nice.
I gotta listen to it."
Oh yeah, man. What? I've never listened to any of his other songs. Does he have any other good ones?
They all sound as cheesy and 80s as that song. So it's like if you like the Never Gonna Give You Up, you will like the other stuff.
Oh, that's like perfect.
Together Forever is a beautiful cheesy song.
Nice. I'll definitely check that out.
And so my last question to you, have you heard the album Saint Anger by Metallica?
Yes, it's been a long time since I placed that in my CD player, but yes.
Okay, so my question to you is Lars Ulrich's snare drum sound, is that a great snare, or is that the greatest snare?
Honestly, I liked it. Believe it or not.
That's one of my favorite all-time albums, so I'm not...
Yeah, honestly...
that tin can snare, though.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people gave that album a lot of flack. And granted, it's not my favorite Metallica album, but I appreciate what they did in that album. And the snare just had this really raw, kind of garage kind of feel to it, with the drum mixing in the snare. So I really enjoyed it. People say they hated it, but personally, I loved it. Yeah,
and it was the first Metallica album I heard, so it was like, people are like, oh, it doesn't sound like Kill 'Em All or Justice, but for me, it was like, that is what Metallica sounds like. It's the first album I heard.
Right.
Yeah, and like that album is so experimental. Like how they cut everything up and paste it together, or they wouldn't mic up the drums properly, they wouldn't mic the bass, and it just sounds really interesting with headphones on.
Yeah, and I appreciate and love that for what that is anyway, when people are willing to really experiment with things like that rather than just the standard, recording procedures and trying new things. That's always been something I can really respect and appreciate.
What's the most experimental thing you've ever done in your music that you could think of?
Most experimental thing that I've ever done.
I guess
with my music.
The real last question.
Yeah. Most experimental thing I've ever done with my music. I'm trying to think about that. There's nothing I can necessarily think of off the top of my head. Granted, like my other than a DAW and the MIDI keyboard I really don't have access to many other methods of recording. So I don't really have too much room at this point to I guess experiment too much, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I don't really utilize samples way too much in my music either. So I can't really say that there's been anything too experimental. I will say that there are going to be a lot of things I'm going to try and experiment with on a new project I'm working on that I was telling you about that I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to be trying a lot of very unorthodox and different things, and just a different approach to the particular genre in general that I'll be working with. So I'm actually very excited about that and to see what comes from that.
That is sick, because I love your music, and then if you're going to be doing some weird stuff, that's like two birds, one stone kind of.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
So thank you very much for being on the first episode of what I'm going to call the Connorcast, because I can't think of a better name for the podcast. So if you want to follow Mike Kelly on Twitter, it's Garoad Music, and Garoad is Garoad. SoundCloud is Garoad Music. Bandcamp is just Garoad, and Facebook is Garoad Music. And go buy his first round Valhalla Prologue soundtrack on Bandcamp, because it is the shit. I hope I didn't fanboy out too much on you with this interview.
Oh, you're fine, man. It's flattering.
Hold it back. Oh my god, I love this guy's music.
Yeah, well, thanks, man. I thank you for having me. It's been great to be on here and talk with you about music and everything. And yeah, thanks again.
So that's it for the first episode of the Connorcast. Thank you again to Michael Garoad Kelly for being on. Be sure to check out his music. If you like the music playing underneath the podcast, that is my music. You can go to www.connorlinning.com, CONNORLINNING. You can download all my music for free. I hope you like it, and you can find other episodes of the podcast when they're up, and other stuff I'm up to, like game development and news. Follow me on Twitter, Connor O.R.T. Follow me on Facebook, Connor O.R.T. Linning. It's the Facebook page. I have a SoundCloud, Connor O.R.T. Linning. I'm on Tumblr, Connor O.R.T. And that's the end. Thank you for listening.